got none other than a good friend of mine, Judge Andrew Napolitano, on the phone. Judge, how the heck are you?
Jeff, I'm well, my dear friend. How are you? And by the way, even though it hasn't been beautiful, it's simply gorgeous up here in the Northeast today.
Well, we're talking mostly here to Florida man and Florida woman, so
Right.
They have higher expectations for March and April than you might. First and foremost, folks, if you aren't catching the Judge's podcast at Judging Freedom, it's the best quick hit, quick takes you're going to get on everything that's happening in the legal world. Many of you know him, of course, as a longtime analyst for all things legal at Fox News, but this really gives him the freedom to say exactly what he thinks in the kind of format you want. So I really recommend the podcast. Judge, I got to start with this. All this hullabaloo around Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. When we're talking about the Senate's role to advise and consent Biden on her nominations, what has that come to mean over the years? What does it mean for them to do that?
Oh, boy. Well, it literally means that the Senate approves her appointment and confirms it by a majority vote. But since the trashing of Judge Robert Bork by the Democrats and then the trashing of Judge Clarence Thomas by the Republicans and the trashing of Judge Brett Kavanaugh, it has come to mean almost anything the Senate Judiciary Committee wants it to mean. I mean, some of the questions that were put to her, in fact, my column for LouRockwell.com this week is about some of the things they said, like, shouldn't interracial marriage be left up to the states? And does the Constitution really protect the right to privacy? I mean, she has nothing to do with any of that, although her husband is of a different race than she is. I thought many of the questions from the Republicans were completely out of line and either betrayed gross ignorance of the constitutional role the Senate should play, to get back to your question, gross ignorance of the Supreme Court's basic jurisprudence, or were merely just grandstanding to please the folks back home. But whatever it was out of line, and it was almost disgraceful.
But, Judge, you know why that grandstanding's happening. They know she's going to be nominated. They know she's going to be approved. Apparently, Susan Collins from Maine is prepared to vote yes. Plus, they've got the vice president as a deciding vote if they needed it. So this is all grandstanding to their primary base. I mean, if she's going to win anyway, why burn any political capital on this? And I think the answer is that people like Mitch McConnell have to appear tough.
Listen, she's an African-American woman. She doesn't change the ideological makeup of the court. I think they should have taken her nomination as a gimme and used it as an opportunity to score points for their recognition of the right of the president to nominate anybody that he wants that's basically qualified. But for them to ask her questions like, what does it mean to be a woman? Obviously, she knows what a woman is, but whatever answer she gave would have gone down a rat hole that could have exploded in her face. So yes, I understand the grandstanding, but it's tough to watch and take with a straight face.
But do you agree that advise and consent ought to simply mean, is the person qualified, and if they are, the president ought to get his or her way?
Yes, and quite frankly, until the Judge Jackson hearings, Senator Lindsey Graham did as well. He who voted for Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor, to confirm Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, three of the most liberal jurists of the modern era, but something got under his skin during the Judge Jackson hearings, and he announced he's not going to vote for her. You know, when William Brennan, who sat in the same court that I did, though he's 2 generations ahead of me, in New Jersey, was appointed by Eisenhower to the Supreme Court. Eisenhower waited until nighttime when the Senate was in recess and made him a recess appointment. He went from being a New Jersey judge on a Tuesday to being a Supreme Court justice on a Wednesday. That term would have lasted until the end of the next succeeding term of Congress, except after about 3 or 4 months, everybody said, yeah, this guy's qualified, let's vote for him. No hearings at all. And that's pretty much the way it was done until they started hearings later in the 60s, and then we had the debacle of Bork, nominated by Ronald Reagan in 1987. So, the Bork one, unfortunately, even though I disagree with a lot of the things Judge Bork wrote and said, unfortunately, it succeeded. He was defeated, 52 against him, 48 in favor, and that, of course, whetted the appetite for both parties to try and block somebody. They nearly did it with now Justice Kavanaugh. I don't remember the numbers, but he did not have 50. I think he won 49 to 47 or something like that. They don't care what they have to do if they can bloody the nose of the person making the nomination, in Kavanaugh's case, President Trump, in Jackson's case, President Biden, or beyond their wildest imaginings, if they can succeed as they did with Bork.
And Bork was eminently qualified.
Well, look, I think Bork was, yes. The short answer is yes. I mean, to call him brilliant was to be guilty of an understatement. He was also extremely candid as a law professor and as an appellate jurist. The charge against Bork was led by Ted Kennedy and Joe Biden, and they went for his jugular. I mean, they sent investigators to empty the garbage pails that his family had put out at the roadside for the garbage company to collect, to see if there was anything incriminating in there. They went to, in the days when you had to rent a movie at a place that actually rented a tape of a movie to you, they went to all the places in his neighborhood to see if they could find what movies he rented, to see if there was anything there that was embarrassing. And they managed to persuade enough Republican senators that this guy was dangerous to freedom. And it was shameful what happened.
But this politicization, I mean, Brown Jackson, she's young, early 50s. She could be on that court for 30, 40 years.
Yes,
and for the next several decades,
and to a lot of people listening to us now who know your ideological background and mine and what you do at the Mises Institute, there's a side of Ketanji Brown Jackson that libertarians should love, mainly civil liberties. Now, look, I'm sure she's going to be in favor of big government regulations and wealth transfers and things like that. But on the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, she's going to be right there with the only libertarian there now, Neil Gorsuch, and the liberals, who occasionally can win over the Chief Justice and prevail when it comes to the Fourth and Fifth Amendments.
Well, since she gets voted up by the Senate anyway after all this dog and pony show, I think the Republicans come away just looking racist, sexist, transphobic with this footage, which is going to be around forever.
Yes, they do. John Cornyn, who's the former Attorney General of Texas and a former justice of the Texas Supreme Court, saying he didn't know what substantive due process meant and talking to her about it as if she had created it. Marsha Blackburn saying that Griswold against Connecticut was terribly decided and there's no right to privacy in the Constitution. And Senator Braun, I'm sorry, I forget his first name, from Indiana, saying shouldn't interracial marriage be up to the states? I mean, these statements are horrific to the modern ear and will come back to bite them. And Senator Cruz, with those pictures from grade school books depicting human beings in bizarre situations, as if this jurist is responsible for what is taught at the school just because she's on the board of the school. It was disgraceful. Disgraceful. They should have looked at this entirely differently, but they couldn't resist the opportunity, to get 15 seconds of fame on Fox or CNN or MSNBC or whoever wants to run what they did in the evening.
But I think a lot of what's happening here is that midterm elections are coming up, and if the Republicans did nothing, a lot of their primary base would say, well, you didn't even fight this woman who gives easy sentences to pedophiles and that sort of thing.
You know, I heard Ted Cruz complaining that her sentences were lower than what prosecutors asked. Good God, prosecutors ask for the moon. They overindict, they overcharge, and when they get a conviction, they always want the maximum sentence. There isn't a judge in the country who always gives prosecutors everything that they ask for. His statement was either born in ignorance or he thought he could just pull a fast one on the news media by making that statement, as if prosecutors were demigods and whatever they want, they should be given.
Yeah, that's so true. We're speaking with Judge Andrew Napolitano. We're up against a break here, but when we come back... Welcome back, everybody. Continuing our conversation with Judge Andrew Napolitano on the day when Judge Brown Jackson is probably being approved in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and her nomination will be up in front of the full Senate later this week. Judge, one thing that struck me over the past couple of weeks is that Clarence Thomas has the actual background that they're trying to make it sound like she has, in terms of he grew up poor in the South, suffered actual discrimination, whereas it sounds like she had professor parents and had a relatively easy path relative to poor Justice Thomas.
Yeah, and of course now they're trying to get an ethics investigation into the pillow talk that Justice Thomas has with Mrs. Thomas. More absurdity. By the way, the Senate Judiciary Committee just tied a vote of 11-11 on Judge Jackson. That means it will take 51 Democrats to approve presenting her nomination on the floor, well, 51 votes, to approve presenting her nomination on the floor of the Senate. Presumably they have that. They have Senator Manchin, and they have Senator Susan Collins. Mm-hmm. But I'm surprised it was a strict party line vote. No Republicans voted for her. I think it's for the reason you stated before the break, Jeff.
Well, boy, have you been following some of the vitriol for Justice Clarence Thomas over the past couple of weeks when he was sick in the hospital?
Yeah, it was terrible. Terrible. You know, the ethics rules were written to prevent judges and justices from ruling in cases in which they have an interest in the outcome. But when they wrote that rule, interest meant financial interest, not interest because someone you love wants you to rule a certain way. You know, the day that ethics investigators can inquire literally over pillow talk or breakfast table talk between a jurist and the jurist's spouse and significant other, is a day that nobody's going to want to go on the court. And Big Brother's surveillance instruments can be used to destroy the independence of the judiciary. I think it's just reprehensible what they're attempting to put him through. And you're right, the things they said about him, obviously hoping and wishing that he wouldn't come back to the court and that Joe Biden would be given a chance to replace him. I don't know what president's going to replace him. He's obviously going to leave at some point. But their lack of human concern for somebody who had a glorified flu was just reprehensible. This is the other side now. This is the Democrats. This is not the people that we were being critical of before the break.
What would impeachment or removal of the Supreme Court justice even look like?
Well, it has happened, but it would require evidence of a crime. There's no mechanism for enforcing the ethics rules on a Supreme Court justice. So the rules apply to every federal and state judge in the country, but with the exception of the Supreme Court of the United States, there's a mechanism for enforcing the rules. There's no mechanism for enforcing ethics rules on Supreme Court justices. There's no means by which the other 8 or a majority of the other 8 could say, you know, Justice Thomas, you can't rule in this case because your wife has expressed an opinion on it. But the last time a judge was impeached was Judge Alcee Hastings. Now, Judge Hastings was indicted, a federal judge in Florida, after his impeachment, joined the House of Representatives. He recently passed away. But as a federal judge, was indicted for bribery. Jury found him not guilty, but the House and the Senate impeached him anyway. There was evidence of criminality, but it wasn't enough to convict. As soon as he was impeached, he ran for Congress and served 20 years there. He was actually in Congress longer than he was a federal judge.
Yeah, it really is something. But is there any reason to think that Judge Brown Jackson would be any worse or any different than Stephen Breyer? I guess she's a young, woke liberal. He's an old school liberal. Should we?
Yes, she is a young liberal. I mean, she's obviously in favor of abortion. She's obviously no friend of the Second Amendment. But this is to be expected from Joe Biden. Just as Donald Trump appointed two traditional conservatives and one more or less libertarian, Joe Biden, a liberal Democrat, in his mind, not as liberal as his presidency, but he can't afford to lose those people on his left. It's his right to appoint her. Look, he had a chance to appoint two African-American females who were conciliators, particularly the one, I forget her name, from the California Supreme Court, who was noted for crafting almost ingenious compromises and achieving majority votes in the California Supreme Court. He could have chose that type of jurist, or he could have chose a hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool liberal. He chose the latter. That's his right to do it. And she's replacing somebody for whom she clerked, who's of like mind, except she's 37 years younger.
You know, the public, though, looking at the Supreme Court, I mean, there's a lot of folks on the left who want to portray not just Clarence Thomas as somehow an invalid justice, but also Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, because they consider Trump's presidency illegitimate. I mean, we're really getting into unprecedented waters here.
Well, I mean, they can think as they want. I don't know what they're going to do about it. Of course, Trump doesn't help that issue by claiming that Biden's presidency is illegitimate. People need to look forward. I didn't want to see Biden elected. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for Trump. I voted for the Libertarian, whoever it was. I don't even remember. But once these elections are held, you've got to move forward, particularly in dangerous times like this, where we're one tank firing away from World War III. You know, one crazy tank commander, Russian tank commander, misreading his GPS, sends his teams across the Polish border, and they destroy American hardware there and kill American soldiers, and all hell will break loose, and Joe Biden will be the commander-in-chief. That's not a very appetizing prospect. No war is appetizing, but war led by him would be extremely unappetizing.
So assuming Judge Brown Jackson is approved by the full Senate this week, what's the mechanism? Does Breyer choose a date and step down during a recess?
Very good question and very unusual, Jeff. I mean, theoretically, Biden should not sign her commission until Breyer leaves. And he said he's not leaving until the term is over. Now, that'll be the end of June. So she will be confirmed but not appointed. She shouldn't even be hearing cases on the court on which she sits. She's in a bizarre limbo, the likes of which we've never seen before, because in the modern era, the successor has never been confirmed and appointed until after the person whose seat they're taking has actually vacated it. But Breyer either thought he was doing Biden a favor, or something within him possessed him to make the announcement months before he's going to leave. There's no way he's going to leave before the abortion and gun cases are ruled on, and those two cases will come out the last day of the court's term, which is the last week in June of this year. So she's got to sit still and do nothing and just hope old Joe doesn't change his mind, because he shouldn't sign that document. He shouldn't sign that commission until there's a vacancy for her to fill. statute says there are 9 justices, and until Breyer physically leaves, there's 9.
Wow, so there's no vacancy.
At the present time, there's no vacancy. Correct. There's his intention to leave, but there's no vacancy. He could change his mind tomorrow if he wants.
Well, we have a couple minutes, quick minutes before the break. She sits on the D.C. Circuit Court. Anything we can glean from that?
She's a serious, methodical liberal. When I say serious, I mean she's hardcore. When I say methodical, is she writes very well and methodically and dots her I's and crosses her T's. A lot of judges are into dicta, sort of throwaway statements to support what they're writing, but statements that are not supported in the literature and are not necessary to reach the outcome. She doesn't do that. She's a smart person. She's going to fit in very well with the liberal camp, and she's not the type of person who crafts compromises. She's going to be writing dissents until the makeup of the court changes more to her side.
Well, we appreciate your time. We've been speaking with Judge Andrew Napolitano. You can follow him on Twitter, and you should, by the way, at Judge Nap, all one word. But more importantly, you can find his Judging Freedom podcast on whatever platform you use, iTunes, Stitcher, all the various podcast platforms. So look for that. And I really recommend it. Judge, it's great talking to you. You have a great week.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for your kind words. Talk to you soon. All the best.